It's 8 o'clock. People are still jumping online. So what we're going to do is I'm going to start, I believe, is Jim Haverstrom on the call? Not yet. See if I can find his number. For those of you that don't know, Jim Haverstrom is, I believe he is formerly the coaching chief for the state of Florida.
Why you letting me back up? We all get that skill, can't lie.
Thank you. Jim is the coaching chief for Florida, or he definitely performs those duties. And he was going to come on, and I'm sure he'll jump on in a minute and answer any questions you might have with respect to the coaching education program. But right now, and I don't want, and Jim doesn't have a lot of time, so I'm going to let him have the floor as soon as he jumps on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get started now, the things I want to go through. And when Jim jumps on, he can take the floor for the moment, and then I'll jump back into what I am doing. Okay, so I just texted Jim to let him know. So I appreciate everybody taking the time out to join us on the call today. I know it's a small group. Hopefully you can share this information with your fellow coaches within your organization. And also, like I said, I'm going to share the recording. Just want to make sure we're all on the same page. That's a little bit on the new rules, but again, this isn't a refereeing or an ask the referee meeting. So we can touch on some things if you want, but it's more going to be going through the SFHL rules and making sure that, you guys are aware of certain things and protocols for games and that, and to make sure that you're not doing things that are violating the rules and you're unintentionally doing it. We want to make sure that you know all the rules and that we are following them for protocol and for the safety of the players. So we're going to get started. I'll get started at the top. The first item was SFHL registration. So just so you know, there are two rosters, if you will. And I'll try and keep this brief. But what you have is you have your USA Hockey roster. That is the USA Hockey 1T roster. And what that is what's your official approved roster that allows your players to play USA Hockey sanctioned events. Such as the SFHL, USA Hockey sanctioned tournaments, and those kind of things. All it does is say that the player has USA Hockey membership, that their date of birth has been verified by the state registrar, and it says that if they needed a transfer, that they have the transfer. So they've been verified with membership. So that allows them to be eligible to play. That does not put them on the roster for the league. Okay, you got to treat the league as separate in this instance. So for the SFHL, you have the roster on SFHLhockey.com. That is the roster, that is the official roster for the league. If the player or a coach is not on that roster, they are not eligible to play in a SFHL game. So the managers, we went over this a couple weeks ago on how to make sure your players are on that SFHLhockey.com roster. There's a couple of steps they have to follow. I don't need to show you guys that. I just want you guys to know that if they're not on SFHLhockey.com, then they're not eligible to play in the league. If you do know of a player that should be eligible and they're not on there, then you need to let me know and we'll figure out why. And then the manager of your team would then go in and have to do an add a player form. And also make sure they're on their USA Hockey 1T roster. So having said that, team composition, you can only have 20 registered players or goalies on your roster at one time. That's your USA Hockey and on the SFHLhockey.com roster. And you can only have, this has become a little bit of an issue, the portal. So your USA Hockey 1T roster, it will allow you to put, I don't know if there's a limit, but Cindy has told me that some teams have put up to 10 coaches on a roster. On the 1T, that's up to you, how many you want to put on there. But on the SFHL roster, you can only have 5 coaches and then 2 managers. Only 5 coaches will show up on the score sheet. So if you need to be on the bench for a game, you have to be on the SFHL roster. And so to be allowed on the bench for the game, you have to be on the score sheet. I'm going to bring up the score sheet here and show you what I mean. I'll put it on the screen. I'm sure most of you have seen their score sheets, but I want to show a few things about the score sheet that maybe you don't see when you're just, checking it before a game, because you're just kind of whipping through it and just want to get it, off your plate and get the game going. So can everyone see the score sheet? Andy, Bob, Bill, can you just let me know yes or no? Yeah? Okay, cool. All right. I asked you, Andy, because I can see you on the camera. And I think is that Alec too, McLeod? Not up and down?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, okay, cool. All right, so here's the score sheet that we use for our league. So here's your rosters. Now, you may look and notice this team player. That is on every roster. That's on there. You don't worry about it. You don't have to cross it off before the game. What that's there for is for after the game, if we have to enter a bench minor penalty for too many players, or a bench minor against a coach, or a game misconduct against a coach, that's what we use. So that has to be on the team's roster. It doesn't count against your 20, so you don't have to worry about that. So before a game, and up here is your goalies. And they're going to be listed twice. They're up there, but they're also listed down here for statistics purposes. But here, the top part here is what matters for the roster. So before a game, the roster is going to be brought over to you. And when you get the roster, the first thing you're going to do is check to make sure that all your players are on there. And then make sure their numbers are correct. And anybody that's not at the game, cross them off. You have to cross them off if they're not there at the game. Now, if they're not there to start the game, but they are on their way, do not cross them off. They can join the game late. There's nothing wrong with that. They can join the game late if they want to. Just don't cross them off the roster. If they don't make it by the end of the game, then you cross them off, or go over to the referee and say, hey, this player didn't make it, so we're going to cross them off. I'm going to get back to that in a minute. We have Jim Haverstrom on the line, the venerable Jim Haverstrom. And so I'm going to turn it over to Jim now, just to talk a little bit about CEP and then field any questions. Jim?
Okay, guys, I know everybody's kind of panicking if they haven't got their CEP yet, because all these clinics are filling up really, really fast. But I can tell you that we're just going to keep adding and adding more as we go along. Even though there's Zoom, we can only have so many people on the call at once because we do all these breakout groups. But right now, literally, I would have your coaches, if they're searching for one, just check every day, because new ones go up and they'll get filled within like a day and a half. The 60 seats go like in no time. I was able to talk with Steve and Cindy and get it pushed back, that basically you have till December 31st to get your CEP. But that also means that there's going to be a lot of responsibility from the hockey directors, because if you aren't done by the 31st, you're going to get redlined on January 1st and you're going to be off the bench, and there won't be any extension. So does anybody have any questions about what's going on?
And once you're off for good. You can't get back on for the rest of the season.
Yeah, once that January 1st deadline's over. And what I wouldn't, it's not like before when, if there was a bunch of guys who needed it December 24th or something, I ran a quick clinic. It's whether or not we could get 4 or 5 guys together to do the clinic, because it takes that many coaches to do it. And I can tell you, I do 2 nights a week, and it's getting like we're all getting like a little bit overworked. So, but we're doing our best to keep having them going each week. What we've done in the Southeast District, we try to do two of the same. We do a shadow clinic, so we can have 60 in one and 60 in the other. And occasionally they'll do a thing where they can get a early sign up for Southeast guys. But when those happen, I forward that to Steve Lynch, and then he usually gets it too, and then he can forward to the associations. Everybody got it?
Any questions, guys? Now's your chance to ask, because this guy has the answers. I don't.
For level 5 on the continuity training that they talked about doing, the continuation training, are we still doing that, or is it looks like it's waived for another year?
If you got a level 5, then that's your continuation for this year. But everybody's going to have to do, even if you have a level 4, you have to do 5 credits of continuing education. And we have 3 years to get it done. And just like USA Hockey and a lot of things, they haven't figured out what those clinics are yet. But it's not going to be onerous. It's not like you have to, it'll be spread over the 3 years, and it'll be a bunch of different kind of topics, everything from coaching techniques to different skills trainings to, they might have NHL coaches do video things. Who knows yet? We're not quite sure.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Jim, for jumping on. Appreciate it. All right. Okay, everyone. So just to kind of reiterate a little bit, I'm going to jump back to the score sheet, but what's going to happen is on December 31st, I'm going to go and check all the rosters, and anybody who's expired will be removed from the roster immediately. So make sure that if you're one of the people that has to get a clinic done, sign up, soon. Don't, like you said, check it every day, get into one and get it done. And because that's something that we're going to be checking very, very closely. So, all right. So moving back to the score sheet. So you make sure you cross out the players that don't make the games. And it's from your roster here and here. Now, what the referees are going to do before the game, they're going to bring the score sheet over to you. And like I said, you're going to check, make sure your players are there, numbers are right, what have you. If you are the head coach on the score sheet and you're there for the game, you'll sign here where it says signature, up in the top, right here, and right here. You guys can see my mouse, right? Moving around the screen. Alec, can you see
Yes.
it? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So that's where you're going to sign. Now, if the head coach is not there for the game and you are an assistant coach, first of all, you have to be listed on this roster in order to be allowed to be on the bench. Do not sign under the head coach. Sign under your name, okay? And cross the head coach out that he's not there, because then that could lead to him getting suspended and not you, or a bunch of other things. And I'll get into that stuff later if a suspension happens, 12 penalties, that kind of thing. So the referees are then going to count the players, the goalies, and the coaches on the bench, and they're going to write it in this spot here. Now, also, if you have a player that's suspended, it should show up here under suspensions if the suspension happened before the weekend. Now, if it's your second game of the weekend, obviously it's not going to be there because we're not going to have been able to get it on there between the first and second games. If that's the case, it's honor system. You have to cross your player off that is suspended and write SUSP or SP or just something that indicates that that player is sitting out and serving a suspension for the game. All right. That's about it with the score sheet. Any questions on the score sheet? Your managers were told on what to do after, and it even says it on the bottom here. If you look on the bottom, when the game's over, use Genius Scan to scan and send the PDF of the score sheet to game results at sayhophockey.org. So it's, I try to make it as foolproof as possible. Also, if you look on the bottom, it tells you, if you're not sure how long your periods are, it tells you down on the bottom too. 10s and 12s are playing 13-minute periods. 14s, 16s, and 18s are 14s, and all minors are a minute and a half. Majors are 5 minutes, and Hispanics are 10 minutes, and that's across the board as far as penalty minute lengths go. And the referees should sign the score sheet. They have to sign the score sheet after the game is done. Okay. Any questions on that? I'm gonna stop there. And I'm gonna move on.
And do you have to circle goalie if you have two?
If you have two, it'll be good if you circle the goalie because it's really a scorekeeper's job. But we know for some of them, we get them to walk and chew gum at the same time. It's a victory, or even just a walk. So if you can circle it, that would be helpful. I'd appreciate that. In the end, though, this is a good point. So when we talk about the 10-20 rule, because I'm not sure that's on here or not, so I'll talk about that right now. The 10-20 rule, some coaches and managers are unaware of what that means until state championships, and then it's a scramble. What that is the number of games that your player and your team must play in order to qualify for the state championships. Every player on your roster that is going to play in state championships must have played in 10 games with your team, and your team must have played 20 total games as a team. So what about goalies? What if we have a starting goalie that plays 18 of the games and the other backup plays only 2? As long as the goaltender is physically there on the bench, he is considered dressed and an eligible player to play the game. It's just like a player that dresses and just sits on the bench. And you guys, if a coach benches him for disciplinary reasons, he still gets credit for the game. He's dressed and he's on the bench and he's eligible to jump on the ice and participate in the game. Same as the goalies. So if both goalies are there, they get credit for a game. So make sure if one of your goalies is not there, you cross him off the roster, and that's off the top part on the score sheet. The bottom is not really that important for the league because we don't track individual stats, just individual games played.
And is that the same if they're injured and they just wear a helmet to be on the bench? Can we
If
have
they're
them
injured and wear a helmet on the bench, they're not considered a player, and so in that case, you cross them off.
copy?
Okay, great question. Okay, so I'm going to move on here. I'm just kind of moving down the rules that I picked out to discuss in this. So it may jump a little bit here and there, but I'm going to try and keep it into a good flow. Jerseys. I do get this question, so I'm just going to cover it. The home team wears white. Away team wears dark. If you have a conflict, the home team should switch. But let's hope we don't have that. And if we do, talk to the other coach. We can make it work. All players and goalies have to be dressed in the same color. They do not have to have identical uniforms as long as the main color is the same, especially early in the season when you're using practice jerseys. So some players have last season's jerseys, others have outgrown them or come from another organization and have to use practice jerseys. That's fine. The goalie must wear the same color as the players. This isn't soccer, and so that's a rule. And the goalies must wear the same color as the players. And they must have a number. And all the numbers have to be unique. No duplicates. You have to press a number on. We don't want taped numbers. They fall off. They get on the ice. You can skate on them and slip and get injuries. So make sure they're pressed on, ironed on, or stitched on, the jersey numbers. Names on the jerseys, completely irrelevant. I don't care. Nobody cares what the name is on the jersey except probably mom and dad. So I've had a few instances where managers have asked me, a player doesn't have a jersey yet. Can we use one from last year, but it has another player's name? Do we have to tape over the name? No, the name doesn't matter. They can wear anybody's name. You can put anything on there except, it's got to be appropriate. It can't be obscene or vulgar. But other than that, the name doesn't mean anything. All right. Why this falls next in the line of the rules doesn't make any sense to me, but fine for failure to play. Just show up for all your games, guys, girls. It's a $750 fine if you don't play a league game, and you're no longer eligible for state championships if you forfeit a game. There are some extenuating circumstances that can occur, and we would deal with them on a one-off basis. But for the most part, there's no reason to forfeit a game. Schedule changes. This one, SFHL league games take precedent over all other games, including tournaments. It's a responsibility of the team requesting the schedule to coordinate with the other teams. So if you have something that's conflicting, You're allowed to make a reschedule. You can reschedule one weekend of games only in the season. You will have to coordinate with the other teams and also procure the ice. And then once you've done that, come to me, let me know, hey, we've got the ice. So you've talked to the rink and they've said, yes, we have the ice available and we're holding it for you. We've talked to the other, probably 2 teams. If it's a 3-game set, we got 3 teams, it's a 4-game set, but depending on which games you want to reschedule, everybody's in agreement. Go ahead and book it, Jeff. So then I'll go in, I'll reconfirm with everybody. Just that's just me. I do that. Don't be insulted that I'm going back on it. I'll confirm with the rink, and then the decision is up to the rink whether they want to. The rink where the games were originally scheduled, it's up to that rink whether they want to work with you and say, okay, we'll be able to sell that ice, so we're not going to charge you. If they don't, then they're going to charge you. Then you have to pay for the ice for the rescheduled games, and that's all on the team that is requesting the reschedule. For the most part, if you give the rink a couple weeks notice, they're probably going to be fine with letting you get out of it without having to pay for it. But I'm not speaking for anybody or everybody. That's completely up to the rink. We book that ice, and the SFHL league takes precedent over anything else. If you've rescheduled a weekend and you need to reschedule a second weekend, the rules say you can't do it unless you come to me first. So just come and ask me. If you do all the work and I just have to change the schedule after, I'm okay with doing that. We want to try and minimize it because it is a little work. I mean, you do all the work, but then I still have to go make sure the officials are canceled for the one game and scheduled for the other and make sure the ice is all taken care of and all that. So it is not zero work for me to do it, but I want to be accommodating as much as I can. You guys are the customers for the league, and I understand, there's other products out there. I want you guys to be happy playing in this league here. I want this league to be the best it can be. So, going down. Okay. So now it's, okay. So the AAA, Steve, I saw you're on. Would you talk just a little bit about the AAA and the Tier 1 rules? You know more a little bit about AAA tournaments and that kind of stuff and Tier 1. I don't know if are you on the call?
Yeah.
You just talk on that a bit.
Sure. Yeah, not a problem. So, just real quick, if let's say your team is a competitive Tier 2 team, and you wanna play a couple of Tier 1 events, your team's permitted to play 2 Tier 1 events, or if you don't want to play strictly Tier 1 events, your team's permitted to play 10 Tier 1 games. Now, let's say you have a player that plays on an Alliance tournament team. If he plays on an Alliance tournament team, those games do not count against him. Those games don't go towards his 10. So the question could come up, well, if my team plays in 2 Tier 1 events and I have a kid that plays on the Alliance, is he ineligible? No, he's not ineligible. He's okay. Any games that are played with the Alliance do not count against those 10 games. Now, if you have a player that goes and plays for another select team outside the state or another tournament team that plays in a Tier 1 event, then yes, those games will count against them. So if somebody calls you on it and says, Joe Smith played in 2 Tier 1 events with your SFHL team, and he also played for a select team out of Philadelphia and played another 5 games. He's played 15 Tier 1 games. Yes, he would be ineligible. So, so that's basically in a nutshell what it is. If anybody has any specific questions, they can direct them to me personally, or you can certainly ask me right now.
If,
All right.
if as a team you exceed that, then you're no longer eligible for SFHL state championships. If
a player exceeds that and then they would become ineligible immediately, not for playoffs, not for as soon as they exceed that 10-game rule or 2-event rule, that player would immediately become ineligible. If a team,
then we would go back to games that he played with the Tier 2 team after he exceeded the limit, and those would be turned into forfeits.
Correct.
If he played in those games. Yeah.
Correct.
And
you know, I mean, we would definitely have to investigate if we have had a situation where a team had no knowledge of the kid playing in an extra Tier 1 event, and we have taken that into consideration if we felt like the team and that the coach had no knowledge of that player in the event. But it's really up to you guys to make sure that the onus is on you. If a kid is going to play for another team for an event, and they'd have to get a tournament roster, and usually to get that tournament roster, every affiliate requires a release, and they would have to get that team's approval. So really the onus would be on the team. But if I go back to the registrar that signs the tournament roster and they say that they did not obtain a release, we would take that into consideration and not penalize the team. But if that registrar says, hey, yes, Coach John gave us a release for him to play in this event, then your team is gonna sustain forfeits.
All right. Any questions, anyone? All right. Thanks, Steve.
All right.
Okay.
Real quick, Jeff, how does that apply if you have a single player that played with a team just for a turn?
I didn't hear you, Alex. You're cutting in and out.
I'm sorry. If a single player is playing for a double team in a tournament, not a single team, any of this stuff.
If a single A player plays on a double A team in a tournament?
Correct.
Oh, that's fine. It's still Tier 2.
All right, thank you.
Yep. Okay. All right. So here we go. Move on. Section B, player and coach rules. All coaches and players must be registered with USA Hockey. We covered that earlier with the USA Hockey 1T roster. Coaches qualifications. So this section used to list all your qualifications. For SFHL purposes, if you're approved on the USA Hockey 1T roster, then you're good to go. If you're not, then you're not and not eligible to be on the bench. What are those requirements? So to get on the USA Hockey roster, you have to have your Safe Sport certification completed for the season. You have to have your background check completed for the season. You have to have your USA Hockey Coaching Education Program age-appropriate modules completed. And you have to now, for this season only, going forward, you are allowed until December 31st to be on the bench without having attended a clinic yet, with the intent of attending a clinic by 12/31. If you have not attended a clinic by December 31st, then you will be removed from the roster immediately, as we had mentioned. If during the season you have coaches and they don't have all of these things, then they will not be approved on the roster. You'll see what's called redlined on the roster, and it's very self-explanatory. There's a big red bar that goes across, and it says redlined coach or players, and it shows them underneath, and it has an explanation as to why they're redlined. If they're redlined, they are not eligible for any USA Hockey activities for that with that team, and I am not able to add them to the SFHL roster. Okay, here we go. This is going to be a little bit extensive, so let's buckle in like Vlad. Suspensions. In any situation where USA Hockey or SFHL rules or disciplinary rulings provide for a participant to be suspended for one or more games for actions occurring during an SFHL game, before, during, or after, like, in the rink before the game or what have you, the suspension is to be applied and served at the next scheduled SFHL league game. This is right now pertaining to any suspensions that are incurred at an SFHL game. If the suspended player or coach's next scheduled game is a USA Hockey sanctioned tournament or a previously scheduled game in a USA Hockey sanctioned league other than SFHL, the manager or the coach of that team can apply to me prior to the start of the tournament games or other league games to use that game to serve the suspension in lieu of the next SFHL league game. And the decision of me is at my discretion. If you ask me beforehand, there'll be no reason for me to deny it, and I'm typically not going to. Games, so now, to use it for games from other leagues, you have to submit to me your schedule for that other league before that suspension happens, or else those games cannot be used because there's nothing saying that you couldn't have just signed up for those games after the suspension. There are teams playing in other leagues. I haven't gotten any other schedules. So if you do get a suspension, here's the catch 22 on that. If you get suspended in an SFHL game, your suspension is a USA Hockey imposed suspension. So you have a 1-game suspension with USA Hockey for the next regularly scheduled game with that team that you incurred the suspension with. The SFHL requires you to serve a game suspension in the next SFHL game. So if your next game after you incur suspension in an SFHL game is a tournament game, you're suspended for the tournament game, the first tournament game, as your USA Hockey suspension. And then you're still suspended for your next SFHL game as part of the SFHL suspension. That's why we allow you to apply to have the tournament game count as your suspension for SFHL. That way you're not serving 2 games for a 1-game suspension. But you have to apply before the tournament game. I have to know beforehand. And then once before the game starts, you're going to write it. You're going to cross the player's name off, write a serving suspension. And then once the game's over and the referee sign off on the score sheet, you'll take a copy of that score sheet and you will scan and send it to me showing that the suspension was served. And so that's how you can... Sorry, Steve?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add one thing. The reason why they have to apply to you, and you said usually you're going to honor it, but a situation where you may not honor it is if a game got particularly feisty, and let's say the teams, for whatever reason, whether it's a reschedule or what have you, have to play back to back. And those same teams play again, get in a league game against each other the next game. That situation, you might, have those suspensions stand. Correct?
I could. I haven't done that yet, but it's never really become. This doesn't happen very often. I would say maybe in a whole season, maybe 4 or 5 times does this really even happen. But potentially, I mean, it's not very often that we get a suspension that carries over to a tournament. And it's not very often that we have a complete Donnybrook where we need to make sure the players are separated.
I'm just saying that's why they have to. I'm just saying that would be an example of why they would have to apply to you. Like somebody might ask, why do they have to apply if you're going to do it automatically? And I'm just throwing out an example.
Right. Yep. Okay, so it goes through here, the procedure. If approved, the coach or team manager must provide the score sheet. If your next USA Hockey scheduled event is a scrimmage or a showcase game, those don't count. So you're going to have to those don't count for the SFHL portion, and you cannot apply to use that to serve it. You still have to serve that game. So you're in essence going to serve 2. You have to serve the scrimmage or showcase game for USA Hockey's suspension, and then you will have to serve the SFHL suspension during the next SFHL game. all suspensions that are to be served during SFHL games, they will appear on the SFHL score sheets if they occurred during SFHL games. And we do make every effort to keep the suspensions current and listed on the score sheets, but it is still the ultimate responsibility of the coaches and managers to comply with the suspension and not play any player, or have a coach participate that is supposed to be serving the suspension. So you can't say, oh, well, it wasn't on the score sheet, so I thought it was okay to play the player. If you know he's supposed to be suspended, you have to sit him out. And it's also the head coach's responsibility to cross off any suspended players and coaches from the roster or the score sheet as proof of serving the suspension. Now, let's flip it the other way. And in the last tournament game, your player got a game misconduct, and your next game is an SFHL game. Let me know. That way I can at least get it on the score sheet for you, and that helps you as far as, proof that he served the suspension. If your next game is a scrimmage or a showcase or what have you, I don't even need to know, because that has nothing to do with me as far as SFHL goes. If you're not serving it in an SFHL game and it didn't occur in an SFHL game, then I don't need to know about it for that purpose. So let's move on here. If a player or coach, so here's when it won't show up on the score sheet. Joey, go ahead.
So what you were just getting at, like if we have back-to-back tournament weekends and I got a kid who gets suspended in my final game of the first tournament that's not SFHL, he can serve it the first game of the next tournament for USA Hockey and he won't be suspended for a league game is what you're saying there?
Yeah, and I don't even need to know about it. It has nothing to do with the league.
All right, yeah, cool. I just wanted to make sure I had that straight. All right, thank you.
Yeah, no problem, Joe. Okay, so here's one instance where it definitely will not show up on the score sheet. Is if a player or coach receives a suspension in the first game of the day during an SFHL game, it's not going to appear on the second game score sheet. I could even be there and put it in, but we know they've printed those score sheets before the day started. So it's still your responsibility. It's even more your responsibility to make sure you cross the player's name off on the score sheet and put some sort of notation, SP or something, to show that they served that suspension. Now, let me just go into some clarifications on some rules here. Players, if it's a game misconduct, that is a 1-game suspension. A misconduct, which is just a 10-minute penalty, which is what is commonly accompanies a check from behind, a charge, head contact. James, what's the other one? Darn it. There's another one. 2 and 10.
Boarding.
There we go. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm out of practice. The misconduct, that is not a suspension. Okay. Now, if they get 2 of the 2 and 10s, or they get 2 misconduct penalties, the second misconduct penalty automatically turns into a game misconduct by the rules, and that becomes a game suspension.
Plus, that'll be 4 penalties, so that'll be another suspension as well.
There you go. Well, as long as they know it's 1, because it's typically 2 games in a day, that they just know they're done for the day. But yeah, so anytime a player gets game misconduct, they're suspended for the next game. If you suspect he had a game misconduct, go to the referees and just clarify, because sometimes these guys, the scorekeeper too, may write it down wrong and it doesn't say game misconduct on the score sheet. But if they incurred it, they still have to serve it. So just go to the referee, hey, can you clarify what this call was? Is there a game misconduct? Is there a suspension? The referee should either tell you, yes, it's a game suspension, or no, it's not a game suspension. And that is it. They shouldn't say, oh, this might be 2-3 games, or this could be, no. They shouldn't be commenting on any lengths of suspensions other than he was assessed a game misconduct or not, and has a suspension for the next game of the day. You guys are all aware, I'm sure, and if you're not, now it's 4 penalties and you get a game misconduct as a player. It used to be 5. Now it's 4. Okay. Coaches, any of you coached this over Labor Day know that now it's 12. It used to be 15. Now it's 12. And now it's not a game misconduct. You continue coaching the rest of the game. You are not assessed a game misconduct. So you will not see one on the score sheet. That does not mean that the head coach is not suspended. You get 12 penalties, you're automatically suspended for the next game. Now, who's suspended? the acting head coach for that game is the one that's suspended. James, I don't want to get into if you were thrown out and the other coaches coaching and all that kind of stuff. I just want to, let's just stick with the basics. Whoever the head coach was for that game is the coach that is suspended for the next game. So like in the instance I talked about when I was doing the score sheet, if the head coach is not there, don't sign in that spot. You sign where your name is. If you're the assistant that's there for the game, that's the coach that is suspended for the next game. Now, you're the only coach, and you are suspended for the next game. Now, who's going to be coaching the game? If you have that's an instance where I probably need a phone call to say, hey, Jeff, this is going on. We don't have another coach. What is the recommendation is going to be that you should have another, if you can have a coach from your organization show up for the second game, that would be preferable. If not, is there a parent on your team that has a coaching education program certification? That would be the preference because we wanted to have a background check and we want to have as much as we can. If an individual like that's not available, then we'll have to consult. It's probably going to have to be, we're in a unique situation because we play 2 games in a day. So, USA Hockey typically would say, well, to finish a game, we will allow an adult to come in and just supervise the bench for the rest of the game. But to start another game without a certified coach, Steve, what is your thought on that, Steve? You're muted. Or you may be off doing something else. Okay.
So what was that, Jeff?
My question is to start. So you get a game misconduct. The coach is thrown out of the first game. He can't coach the second game. He's the only coach. They don't have anybody else that can do it that's certified or anything. Can you start a game with just an adult on the bench?
Well, I don't think you can put anyone on the bench unless they're safe sport and background check.
But you got to have somebody on the bench at a youth game to coach.
I don't know. I don't think that's really covered in USA Hockey rules.
Right. I'll
think
get back.
Jeff, it's Stone.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure in USA Hockey, that's not a reason to cancel the game as long as you can have an adult that's on the bench.
Right. I know you can to finish a game. I don't know about starting one, but I'll take that as a takeaway, and I'll address that. I'll send an email out, communication, or we'll just handle it on a one-to-one basis because it's not something that happens frequently. So, okay. So my notes, they show the score sheet where suspension is marked. I showed that earlier. Okay. So what happens and this actually happens at least typically once a year. Any player or coach that knowingly participates in a game that he or she should be serving a suspension will result in forfeiture of the game that the ineligible player or coach participated in. The player or coach will still be required to serve the suspension in a subsequent SFHL game. And then the head coach of the team for the game in which the suspended player or coach participates illegally will be assessed a 1-game SFHL suspension for a first offense, a 5-game suspension for a second offense, and a 1 calendar year suspension for a third offense. It's a pretty serious offense to play an illegal and a suspended player. So the suspensions are pretty serious as well. That's why they're pretty severe. And so that's that. Supplementary discipline, we have it in here. In addition to the suspensions imposed by the refs, the SFHL reserves the right to investigate any incident that occurs in connection with any game. Any incident that occurs prior to, during, or after a game is subject to review. Video may be submitted or requested to support any potential supplementary discipline to aid in assessing the incident in accordance with the SAHOF video review policy. So we have revamped our video review policy, and it's a lot more robust, but I believe it's a much better policy than it was before. I will actually bring it up here, and I'll show you what it is, and I'll kind of just go over the video. Let me finish suspensions first, and then I'll go over the video review policy. So carryover suspension. So this still applies for 10 and 12A for this weekend. if you had a suspension carried beyond the last game of the SFHL regular season last year or from the state championships, still have to serve it in the first game of the SFHL season. You can't serve them on spring teams. So, all right, that's it for carryovers. Multiple game misconducts. Any coach or player that receives 5 game misconducts over the course of the SFHL season automatically receives an additional 6-game suspension. Haven't seen that yet. Hope I don't. Okay, so, any player who receives a second major for fight, that's a USA Hockey rule. I'll pass over on that for now. Any player gets 2 fighting majors with the same team during the same season shall receive a 3-game suspension from USA Hockey. So if a player gets one with your team and then gets one with their high school team, that's 2 different teams. So that doesn't count. I think it should, but it doesn't. Okay, so that's pretty much suspensions. Any questions on suspensions there? I know they can get pretty complicated with serving them and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I got a question, Jeff.
Yeah, Joe.
You were saying before, like a hit from behind, obviously is like 130 and then a 10. If they do that twice in a game, they're out for that game and they're out for the next game. But then it's also a 4 penalties. So would it be a 2-game suspension, or would it just be the 1 next game?
That's correct. 2.
So if they get 2 hit from behinds, they're out for the next 2 games.
That is correct.
All right, I just wanted to make sure I had that right because some of my kids can't skate very well or stuff. So, all right, thanks.
Yep. I don't disagree with a lot of the rule changes. I think they're good, but I wasn't a big fan of this 4 and 12 thing. They wanted to go 3 and 9, from what I understand. So, any other questions on that? Let me jump over to the video review policy now, and go over that. Let me bring it up on the screen here. Okay. So it is Addendum 5 in the SFHL rules. So introduction, I'll skip that. Purpose, I'll skip that. On ice official judgment. By way of this policy, SFHL wishes to communicate its position when it's appropriate and responsible to use video review. Skip over that part. It's important to understand that a protest on a referee's decision will not be considered unless it is outlined in this policy. So, video that may not be reviewed. SFHL will generally not accept the following. Video for the purpose of reviewing goals or disallowed goals. That game's over, the game's over. We're not going to be adding goals or taking away goals. Videos for the purpose of reviewing the conduct or actions of any team or individual player unless otherwise outlined in this policy. And then videos for the purpose of reviewing on-ice officials' calls or non-calls, nor for the purpose of reviewing the on-ice officials' penalty selection unless otherwise outlined in this policy. The rationale behind these guidelines is that all on-ice officials have the appropriate rules at their disposal to penalize in these situations. Now, videos that may be reviewed. Videos for the purposes of identifying the correct player in situations where an incorrect player may have been identified by the on-ice officials and issued a penalty resulting in suspension. We actually had that at the Labor Day tournament in Orlando. A player was assessed believe it was a major in a game misconduct, and it turned out he was the wrong player. We got video, and we rescinded the suspension to the player that was erroneously suspended and assessed the game suspension to the correct player. So that's actually come into play already. Number 2, videos for the purpose of reviewing the conduct of game officials and team staff. 3, videos for the purpose of reviewing a game situation that has resulted in an injury to any player, whether a penalty was assessed or not. SFHL may use this video when determining the appropriate length of suspension to any player or players who may have been directly involved in a player being injured, whether or not a penalty was assessed at the time of the injury. So that's basically, if there's an injury, we can use the video to help us determine the length of suspension, whether or not a penalty was assessed. Videos for the purpose of reviewing a situation where the actions of a game participant could warrant the assessment of a match penalty, whether or not a match penalty was actually assessed by the on-ice officials at the time of the act being committed. And then videos for the purpose of reviewing the conduct of spectators or parents. So that's kind of the criteria of when you can submit a video to be reviewed. Only videos submitted or endorsed by an association or team will be reviewed. So only if it comes from your hockey director or your team manager or coach. If a parent says to you, hey, we sent an email with a video to the USA Hockey or SFHL or whatever, and they didn't respond, correct. We will not respond to those. Video, if available, may be requested or sourced by SFHL at any time to aid in this decision-making around on or off-ice conduct. So we can always request video from wherever we need to get it from. Here's the process to submit a video review. A review will be considered jointly by a member of the SFHL Discipline Committee, the Florida State Referee-in-Chief, and the SFHL Executive Director when the following has been submitted by the respective association or team to the Executive Director of SFHL. A copy of the video in its entirety. So don't send something where you've clipped the 3 seconds where the player, high stick somebody or swung a stick at them. We need the lead up and the aftermath of the video also. Try and give us as much video as you can. And if you don't, we may request additional video. A deposit of $100, and this deposit is refundable only in instances in which the video review appeal is successful in whole or in part. Should the appeal be denied or ruled inconclusive, the deposit is forfeited to SFHL and we'll donate it. We're not keeping the money. It's going somewhere. We just haven't selected any charity or program to fund yet. Send a copy of the score sheet, and the submission takes place within 24 hours of the game in question or 24 hours after a suspension has been issued, whichever occurs later. So if the game ends and there's no suspensions, then you have 24 hours to submit a video review to, try and get, if you feel a player should be suspended. Where the other part of that comes in is if, say, the game ends, there's no suspension, and then a day later a player gets supplementary discipline and gets a suspension, you have 24 hours to send video in, more so to either say, we feel there should be more, or we feel the player shouldn't be suspended. So that's where you would probably have the 24 hours after a suspension has been issued. And a submission form has to be properly filled out with a detailed statement regarding what is being appealed. I'm not sure if it's out there yet. We are working to get the form out there on safhockey.org. We'll direct you to where that is whenever we have that out there. The maximum allowable requests from any single team within a member association shall be 3 per season. So just keep that in mind. So, and then the procedure, we'll take it in, we'll review it. These SFHL rules are going to be out there on the web very soon, so you can read these. But once you submit it for review and we've ruled on it, SFHL has ruled on it, then that's final and there'll be no further appeal. We actually mined the web for, we took about 6 or 7 different leagues or associations, policies, and took the best from all, what we thought were the best from all of them to make our policy here. So, Vlad, you might want to turn your camera off, buddy. All right. Any questions on that video policy? Okay. All right. League play, just reiterates that the players must be on your 1T roster and on your USA Hockey roster. Sorry, your SFHLhockey.com roster. Vlad, can you turn your camera off, bud? Thanks. Oh, boy. All right. Fun times. Just a couple things here. Any organization that has 2 teams in the same age category, or what we call a league, is prohibited from moving players between the rosters of the 2 teams. So, for example, in 16AA, there's 2 Clearwater teams. They are not allowed to put move players between the two teams, for obvious reasons. So, want to mention that. Adding and removing of players, your managers know about this, so I'm not going to go over this again. Your managers are the ones that typically are doing the adding and removing of players, so I'll gloss over that. Score sheet rosters, don't write in. So let me go over this part here, because this is a little bit of a change that I wrote in here just to try and cover as many situations as possible. So skaters, goalies, and coaches should not be written in on the score sheet. If the person does not appear on the score sheet, that person is not eligible to participate in the game in any capacity. However, if there's a dispute as to whether that person should be on the score sheet, then the team's head coach may write the individual in on the score sheet, and that individual shall be permitted to participate in the game only if that person is on the approved USA Hockey 1T roster of that team. By doing so, they understand and accept the consequences detailed below should it be determined that individual is not eligible to participate in the game. So pretty much what it means, that part means, is the player was added to their USA Hockey 1T roster, and somehow they didn't get them on the SFHLhockey.com roster or the SFHL League roster. They didn't submit it in time. They didn't submit it at all. Those are the reasons it didn't happen. I'm a human being. I might miss something. I might make a mistake. That's why I put this exception in here, that if you are 100% sure you did everything right and it was a mistake on the league's part, a clerical error, then you can go ahead and write them in. And if it was a clerical error, then we're good to go. We just move on. If it was not a clerical error, then we have a problem, because the only allowable change really on the score sheet is the player's number. So if you have to change, if a player's not wearing a number that doesn't match what's on the roster, you have to change the number, but that's all you're supposed to be able to change. Now, getting down to the nit, if you played the player, you wrote him in, and he or she was not eligible, then if that player is determined to be ineligible, the game will be declared a forfeit. The head coach of that team for that game will be suspended for 1 game. So not necessarily the head coach, it's whoever was the head coach for that game. Again, that's why we write in, we're going to sign under our name, not just the head coach's name. A second violation of this rule will result in a 3-game suspension for that head coach. Now, that's if it's a player. If a coach is on the bench for an SFHL game and is either written in on the score sheet or not on the score sheet whatsoever and is determined to be ineligible, then either one or two things happens. If the official head coach for the team is present at the game, so whoever is listed as the head coach, if that person is there, then that head coach will be suspended for 1 game, and the coach that was written in will be suspended for 1 game from the team he or she is rostered on. And if he's on multiple, then I pick where he's suspended. A second violation of this rule will result in a 3-game suspension for all parties. Or, in the other scenario, if the official head coach for the team is not present at the game, he's still responsible for his team. So the team's official head coach will be suspended for 1 game. The head coach of that team for that game will be suspended for 1 game. And the coach that was written in will be suspended for 1 game from the team he or she is rostered on. Again, I pick the team. Second violation of this rule will result in a 3-game suspension for all parties. A third violation of either of those rules will result in a disciplinary hearing with the SFHL Discipline Committee. Additionally, if the coach who was written in on the score sheet is not on any SFHL roster, then a disciplinary hearing will be conducted with the violating organization to determine any sanctions to be levied against the organization. So here's what this is about. We go through Safe Sport, we go through background checks, we do the modules, we do the CEP. That's to make sure you know what you're doing and to protect the kids from, whatever those are designed to do. It's to protect the players. So by allowing somebody that's not on the roster or that's not on any roster, we're potentially putting them at risk. Well, I've known him for 50 years. Folks, it's happened. And we have rules in place. And we are not bending on these rules, and we are going to be very strict on these rules. here's my recommendation to you. If you all only have one or two coaches on your roster, who do you think may fill in for you on certain weeks? Get them on the roster. Get them to do their USA hockey and get them on the roster. If they're not going to do it, get them background checked and safe supported and get them to do the modules. If they don't want to attend a clinic, they can at least be on your roster till December 31st, right? So at least it gives you options of coaches to be legally on your bench. There's people out there watching. I know people, and I tell them to watch and make sure. There's 3 coaches on that bench, but they only have 2 on the roster. Take a picture and send it to me. And I'm telling people to do that because it's important. We go through a lot of trouble and a lot of work to make sure that we vet the coaches that are supposed to be on the benches to make sure we have the right ones listed on the score sheets. And that's for a reason. So yes, the suspensions may seem harsh, but it's not intended to suspend people. It's intended to deter you from doing things that will get you suspended. So there's some where they have the same, and that's why I wrote in the exception of where the official head coach for the team is not present at the game, because I don't know if it was done intentionally to circumvent these rules or not, but there's some where the same head coach is on 5 different rosters. And if he's not there, then, go ahead and suspend him. He doesn't need to be there anyway. So, well, that's no longer going to be the case. Whoever's the head coach on that bench will get suspended, and so will that head coach that isn't there for the game. So I think I've, done enough on my soapbox for that, but we're going to be strict in enforcing it. If you see other teams that aren't following the rules, the best thing for you to do is take a picture, or if it's a rink that has live barn, just tell me the game and I'll do it. And hopefully I can get, sometimes live barn doesn't have the benches, so a picture is best of the whole bench. So, I know you probably aren't going to narc on one other because you don't want to be narked on, but it's about protection for the kids and the players. So, all right, that's enough of that. Game results. Any questions on that, guys? Girls? I don't know. Okay.
Jeff, I'm a little bit, I'm kind of wondering what's going to constitute being on a bench, because if I observe an ineligible coach on a bench, I might be inclined to tell the referee in the first minute of the game, and then he's only been on the bench for 1 minute. Is he going to be suspended? Or
if you go to the referee and say he's not supposed to be on the bench, and the referee gets him off the bench, and he gets off the bench, and there's not a problem, then to be honest, we've accomplished what the goal is, and that's to keep somebody off the bench that isn't there. That should.
Cool.
I mean, I'm not looking to suspend people. I'm looking to keep the right people on the bench and keep the wrong people off the bench. Even to the extent, if you're working the penalty box, you don't have to have a credential. Any adult. So if you got to be around your team close, work the penalty box if you have to. That doesn't mean you get to go into the player bench unlimited. So that's up to you guys as the coaches to make sure that this isn't happening also. If that person tries, say, listen, you can't be on the bench, because if somebody says something, I get suspended. So good question, though. Appreciate that. Okay, moving down. First scores on the website, sfhlhockey.com. On the score sheet and not on the score sheet, but on the website, all single A and all 10U AA games will be subject to a 7-goal maximum differential for posting on the website and for tiebreaker purposes. 12, 14, 16, and 18 AA will record scores as they are, and there will be no goal difference maximum for those divisions. We are not posting player stats on the website except for penalty minutes, individual player statistics. So no individual scoring stats will be posted as we've done in the past. We're going to continue that practice. Okay, here's one, guys, that always ends up in being a problem and ends up in the suspension that didn't have to happen. At the conclusion of games played at facilities where both teams exit the rink through one common exit door, the home team, so examples of that, I'm thinking Ellington is the first one that comes to mind, where both teams exit through the center ice door. It can happen in Daytona. It's not as likely, but Daytona it can happen. But you know what I mean. In those instances, the home team should go and wait at their bench following the game and let the visiting team exit first. The referees, and again, guys, I do the best I can. I do communicate this to them. You know what I'm saying there. But they are supposed to instruct the home team to wait and then exit once the visiting team has completely exited the playing surface and cleared the door. If an altercation occurs at the common entry exit door resulting directly from both teams exiting at the same time, I hate having this rule. Regardless of who's at fault, the head coach of the home team is supposed to receive a 1-game suspension for allowing his or her team to exit while visiting the visiting team while still exiting the playing surface. So home team coaches, keep your team at the bench until the other team is off when you're going through the same door. If you're not going through the same door, then you can go and exit as soon as the game's over. Now, there's one other post-game conduct rule I want to touch on. After the game has ended and players and coaches have left the benches and entered the playing surface, so the buzzer goes, the game's over. Once the players file onto the ice, if any player or a team official is assessed a misconduct or a game misconduct, so just even a 10-minute misconduct or game misconduct, for a physical action directed towards or at any member of the opposing team, that player or team official will receive an automatic and additional 2-game suspension. So if you get a game misconduct, so say the game's over and everybody's on the ice and one of your players goes and, I don't know, just punches another player in the head and he gets a 5-minute major in a game misconduct. He'll get that game misconduct suspension and he'll get 2 more games for doing it once the game is over. The reason is there's 10 plus more players on the ice. There could be 20 players on the ice. Something happens, we could be in, a lot of dangerous things can happen. So we implore you as head coaches to make sure your teams are separated after the game's over, and make sure you wait if there's something going on by the net or something going on the ice. Keep your players on the bench until the game's actually over and the players have been separated. We actually had about 3 of these suspensions assessed last year. Now, last year, the rule was just if it happens after the game. So we had one instance where a player skated by the referee and slammed his stick on the ice and got a 10-minute misconduct for that. That's why I added the part of for physical actions directed towards a member of the other team. I don't want to suspend a kid 2 more games for doing that. That's not what the intent of the rule was, but it's the way the rule was written. So we've changed it now. It has to actually be something towards the other team. If it's something like that to the referee has tools in his toolbox that he can use that he would feel appropriate to assess. So, any questions? Okay. Incomplete game. This is so rare. It's in here. I'm not going to go over it. It's actually rare, but it's happened twice now in the last 6 months. In Ellington, we had a game go 2 periods and had to be stopped. And then just last week, we had a game in Lakeland that had to be stopped. So it tells us the procedures that we go through for that. So they are outlined. Emergency goalie. Do I need to go over the emergency goalie rule? Again, that's kind of a not frequent thing. So if somebody wants me to go over it, tell me now. Otherwise, I'm going to skip right by it.
Yeah, my question, Jeff, this is Alec.
Yeah.
We're Orlando. We have either a regular season Seahawk game or a tournament down at West Palm, and everybody's there, and then the goalie can't make it. They blew a tire. So as long as the player's on the roster and we have gear for them, can we take a skater and have them be a goalie until the real goalie shows up? Or what
that's actually what you would do. James, or Stone, do you want to talk just quickly about the temporary goalkeeper rule? Because I've always been confused by that.
I don't know a whole lot about it. I don't recall that being on the level 4 test.
It wasn't. Or at least
And is there a difference between Sayhoff and a tournament?
no, it's all USA. It's a USA hockey rule. So the emergency goalie rule is different. What we have the emergency goalie for is if, for the most part, is if you know your goalie's not, you have one goalie on your team, or if you have two and you know your goalies aren't going to make it for the SFHL game, you can get a goalie from another team to play for you for that weekend. And again, there's rules governing. We prefer it be a goalie from your own organization, although it's understandable that may be difficult to accomplish. And if you have to go outside your organization, that's allowed, but the other team has to agree to it. We expect good faith as to whether they would agree to it or not. And there's parameters surrounding the level that the emergency goalie can be playing to substitute for you. Like you're a 10A2, so your options are pretty limited. It can only be a 10A goalie or below, or it could be an 8U goalie. And then the other team would just have to agree that, well, first you'd have to get permission, and then they would, from the other organization, to ask them if you can borrow their goalie. And then if that's okay, then you ask them who you're playing against if they're okay with you using that goalie. And unless they know he's a superstar goalie, they're going to 99 times out of 100, they're going to be okay with it. So,
Right. So my understanding, being A2, if we only have one goalie, so if he can't be there, that's what I'm trying to cover. If I can have any of my other players play it, then they still don't mess up the 10 and 20. They're okay with that because they were there, they participated.
Yep.
And, we just circle them on the goalie and cross out a regular goalie and we're good to go.
correct. And if it's at the start of the game, he is the goalie, and he is considered a regular goalie, not temporary goalie. He is the goalie you're dressing for that game, so he has goalkeeper privileges, but cannot skate out for that game unless you later in the game you want to switch him out. And then now we're getting into the weeds with the rules, and it's a minor penalty and all that kind of stuff. But that's really getting into the weeds and the rules. So, but
Okay,
but you can do that, yes.
Okay. Sorry.
Okay. Determination of champions. The league champions are recognized by SFHL. The team within the specific age group with the highest total points at the end of the season will be designated as champion of that age level. In cases where the age group or level has been split, like we have North-South in one of the divisions, and I think we have West, Central, and South and a couple other, the winner of each division will be designated the division champion, but a league champion will not be awarded. So you'll get each of them will have a division champion, because it's an unbalanced schedule. There won't be a league champion. But if it's the West, Central, and South, each of the three division winners will get a division championship banner. I think that covers most of the agenda I had. I covered the minute and a half, 5 minutes, 10. Forfeits go down to 7-0. I think that's about does anybody have any questions about anything that you wanted to ask me about the league or anything? Oh, before you guys do. Schedule's done. It's approved. I have one rink with one day to approve. I'm going to get that first thing in the morning. Even if I don't, I'm going to post the schedule tomorrow for all divisions through the end of the regular season, which is February 13th. State championships, we do not have dates or facilities finalized yet. We are anticipating the state championship to happen on the first and second weekends of March. Don't know which divisions will play on which weekends yet, but anticipate the national bounds at least to be on the first weekend so we can get them lined up for getting ready for nationals. The rest are going to depend on how we can line up how many teams in each division. If you want to know how many teams qualify for the playoffs, that's on SFHLhockey.com. There's a link there. It says playoff qualification. And that will tell you everybody hang on, I'll show you in a second. That will basically show you which team, how to qualify for the state championship. So I'm going to share my screen here. Here's SFHLhockey.com. And then there's a link right here, playoff qualification. And it's all right here. So 10A black, 10A orange. And each one shows you the qualifications, if there's a note on it, and also how the regular season schedule was done. So for 10A Black, for instance, all teams will play each other when they're in their own division 3 times. Then they'll play all other teams in the other divisions once, with a second game against a team from another division selected at random. That one is going to be that was done for travel to put it in 3 divisions. It enables the younger age there to not have to travel as much. And then the 12A white did the same thing. If I was able to geographically divide a division that had an even number of teams into 2 divisions or 3, then I did it. If I wasn't able to, then I didn't do it. Like the 10A orange, there was no way to divide the team composition. There was no sensible way, so I just went with an open 12-team division and schedule. But you can see the 12A white, there's a west, a central, and a south that kind of made some sense. And we were able to do the schedule that way, and it reduces a little travel because they're playing their local teams once more during the season. And I felt that the travel reduction, especially at the 12A white and in the 10A black divisions, was definitely worth the doing it that way. So this is your basically everything: your schedule, your standings, your the league rules are here also, so you can go there and read up a lot on what we just talked about today. So that's the rules and regulations for the SFHL. Teams, players, suspensions, all that good stuff. So the other site is sayhoffhockey.org/SFHL. That has some of the similar information, but that is also where the team managers go to add players and remove players and request game reschedules. So that, I think, covers everything I had. Does anybody have any other questions for me? Maxime, looking pretty dark in there. Oh, sorry, it's Max now, right?
Yeah, that's right. What's up, Jeff? How are you?
Good. All right, I think we're good. Guys, I want to thank you guys for taking the time out to be here tonight. I really appreciate it. I hope this was some useful information for you. And like I said, expect the schedule tomorrow sometime. And have a good night. Thank you.
See you, Jeff. Thanks.